Hello, this is Mrs. Politsky, and I have your notes for Chapter 1, Section 3 of Business Law. We're going to get into talking about ethics. So, there are three elements of ethics, and these are the three. Uh, any kind of decision that we make about a right or wrong action is usually kind of referred to as using ethics. Okay, and typically on ethics, we examine kind of the morality behind the different things that we are trying to decide to do or not to do. Decision is also reason. In other words, you've thought about this, you haven't jumped in and made a rash decision. And then finally, the decision is impartial. In other words, you're doing kind of what is the best course and not worrying about so much the two different sides that might be involved. All right. Ethics and the law. When we talk about the basic forms of ethical reasoning, it kind of comes down to two things: consequence based ethical reasoning and rule based ethical reasoning. So, consequence is kind of thinking about like what's going to be the outcome here. An act that produces a bad consequence might be judged as being bad using consequence based ethical reasoning. Rule based ethical reasoning might basically say that you cannot justify an action by showing that it produces good consequences. And you could talk about this maybe more than just like in the field of business, but you could talk about it in the field of politics. You could talk about it in the field of military science. You could talk about it perhaps maybe in the field of theology and such. All right. So ethics reflected in the law. Uh, in this day and age, we typically look at things like majority rule. So if the majority says it's okay, typically that's kind of the way we go. Now, does that mean that if the majority wants to do things a certain way, is it always right? Not necessarily. Civil rights are also something that is reflected in the law. And sometimes civil rights boil down to even though the majority might want something, we got to think about um, the minority. And that's part of this as well. And then this notion of integrity, just doing what is right when no one is watching. Are we doing this for the right reasons? And not necessarily to get revenge or to cause suffering or such. All right. Thank you very much.